Welcome to this third session of the second edition of the ACMHangouts, which are hosted by Arts Council Malta. So as you know by now, during these sessions, we are inviting professionals, creatives, experts to join our discussion, focusing on a number of different topics related to culture and creativity, and more specifically to the strategy work which the Arts Council is currently focusing on. The sessions are all going to be streamed on the Arts Council Facebook page and will be then available on the same page in case you want to check them out at a later point. So today we shall be focusing on a very relevant subject, the online shift, the present, speaking about the present, what is happening now and what will likely to be happening in the future. And our panel is made up of Neville Borch, who is the Research Associate at Arts Council Malta, Professor Vince Briffa, artist, curator and academic, and Simon Spiteri, who is a playwright, theatre director and also a lecturer. So I would like to start and give the floor to Neville for his introduction about the subject.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm really happy to be here to be discussing this topic with the panel and with our guests today. We all know the impact that the online world and digital technology has had on our everyday lives, but we don't always think about it as thoroughly in terms of its impact on the art world and on artists and on the way it has really changed forms of creation, of dissemination, of distribution, in terms of artistic works. So I think it's really important that us as an Arts Council really engage with this topic on a deeper level, especially given the current context. These changes obviously aren't new. What really has changed is the circumstances surrounding it. So, I mean, we've long known about the impact of digital technology on artistic works and how artists can really engage with the issue. But all of a sudden, because of the pandemic, all the other alternatives kind of disappeared right in one go. And perhaps we didn't really have the knowledge and the skills and the techniques to really deal with that situation at the time. So I think now is really an ideal moment for us to really engage with the issue on a deeper, on a more thorough level. Digital technology really raises many new issues and many new concerns, but it also kind of reignites and elaborates on some very old concerns. I mean, 100 years ago, people like Walter Benjamin, for example, were really worried about the impact of the printing press and on mass distribution on the work of art. And now we're kind of thinking through the same questions in terms of augmented reality, in terms of streaming, in terms of all these different forms of creation and distribution of artworks. So it raises these very old questions, but it also raises new questions related to privacy, to security, to distribution as well. So I think this is a really ideal opportunity for us to really engage with these issues. As an Arts Council, we're trying to engage with these issues both through sessions such as this one, discussions with experts and with people who are really can provide new insight into the matter, but also through investment. And one thing I want to mention is that over the next few weeks, we will be launching a new funding program that deals specifically with digital technology. Specifically, it's the Digital Research and Development Grant, which will, I think, really help artists and practitioners explore many of the issues that we'll be talking about today through their work and through their research and through their practice and through their capacity building as well. So to anyone who's watching, please do keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, so it's also a statement from the Arts Council's end that this is kind of something that needs to be explored further.
I mean, I think a lot of cultural entities, even locally, already had this at the back of their minds in terms of, we really need to engage with the digital world in a more clear and more coherent manner. But obviously the pandemic kind of accelerated this and kind of really brought it to the forefront in terms of this as an urgent need for us to really explore.
Exactly.
So, Yeah.
And I'm really glad that actually that you mentioned this point, and I would like to ask Vince about this, because historically there has always been this interest in arts and the digital world, and there has been this relationship, this flirting going on between these two sectors. So it's not new. It's just it was highlighted, as Neville said, further in this pandemic. So how true is this? And as in, can you give us a little bit of historical perspective here about the subject?
Thanks, Elaine. Yes, of course. I mean, as you well said, art and technology have always been strange bedfellows, as we call them. Obviously, the technology from the digital technology started around about 1960s. Well, of course, the computer was being introduced on the mass market. And each and every 10 years, let's say 20 years after, the internet was launched. So in a way, we do not have enough time to adapt, funnily enough. I mean, 10 years is not a very long time for someone to adapt to a technology and include that technology meaningfully within a work practice. But what we're seeing now is really and truly what happened much before with photography, for example, with the practice of photography, with the practice of video. Video in the 1950s was a new tool. And the first uses of video within the art world were very much of one of protest and one of of activism, because artists saw the potential of the new technology and appropriated the technology in order to sort of find different ways of doing things. And this is the beauty of technology within the art world. The artist always appropriates the technology. The artist does not sort of use it, but appropriates it to use it to his or her own means. Now what is happening now, what we're seeing now, is somehow a bit different, because we are at a point whereby we were pushed in using this technology. Now, there were artists who already were using technology, of course. I mean, technology has been used, very widely within artistic practice and within education as well. But people, let's say, who have used more traditional means of, let's say, painting, for example, have been pushed into showing their work online only.
Exactly.
Now, that has huge ramifications for the art world. And the mind shift has not been made. This is what I find to be the biggest problem, because we, as practitioners, I think we need to look at art and technology. It's not either or; it's them together. You know. So how should I be using technology in order to make it meaningfully within my practice? Making it a meaningful tool within my practice.
But I think that's exactly it. No, recently what we've seen is that technology is being used to present your work rather than it being embedded in the practice. I mean, now it became.
This is the problem. This has always been the problem, because we always looked at technology as an aside.
As a means
as a
for
painter,
promotion,
for example,
probably.
Promotion. I mean, I really do feel that platforms such as Instagram, for example, for the visual artist nowadays, needs to be refigured, need to be rethought as part of the practice, not as part of the exhibition side of the practice, whatever that is. So we have huge challenges, but we also have huge opportunities. If we really feel that, if we really look at the new technologies that are coming out, especially VR and AR, for example, and try to find ways and means of integrating them within our own practice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the challenge that we're facing at the moment. And I think whoever manages to do this meaningfully will actually be very successful in the way that practice is created.
I am curious to see what Simone thinks about this, because I remember a conversation, actually it was another discussion platform, and we were discussing this topic back in April. And kind of obviously at that point we had a number of concerns and a number of, like it was almost threatening the idea of having kind of this other channel to express our work. So we rushed into it, we didn't really have any plan. So what are your thoughts now about this and what Vince just said?
Well, I come from the theatre, so automatically, although even in the theatre world, the concept of technology was not a new concept at all. However, we were inviting technology into the theatrical space, and suddenly it was the other way around. We were the guests of the technological space, so kind of the tables turned completely, and what a lot of people would expect, the straightforward experience of a theatrical experience was completely removed. So that in itself has made us rethink everything, rethink not just in terms of whatever it is that we're going to be creating now is on a screen, and already that was and still is a point of wide discussions. Is this theatre? Is this not theatre? What should we call it? I personally think it is just something new, and I don't think we should try and pigeonhole it into something.
Yes.
It's just something new. You spoke about April. I think in April we were still under shock. Totally, in general. But, a couple of months have passed now, and I think theatre has not stopped. A lot of people think that theatre has stopped, but it hasn't. It has been readapted, and and a lot of practitioners have had to rethink not just what the final experience is going to be like, but even in terms of skills, in terms of the connection with an audience, which has changed. And there was a lot of experimentation, even in terms of platforms, because the thing that was always common in all previous experiences was not there. So the theatrical space was not there. So I think that what has happened in this past year almost now was a very experimental phase. I think as with everything experimental, some things didn't work, some things are working, but I think what I feel is really exciting is that now we're a little bit past the first shock of what has happened and so on. And I think it has pushed a lot of creatives to not think in terms of, listen, how can I adapt what I usually do to the situation, but how can I exploit the situation for what I want to do? And I think it is yielding a lot of new and different things, even in terms of concepts, because I think we're talking also a lot in terms of logistics, obviously, because at the moment it's not just a matter of wanting to be online, but we can't do otherwise and
exactly.
there's the element of a physical touch that is not even allowed, because there are measures that we have to respect and so on. So that is already some. For example, I've seen it a lot in the theatre. When things are put online, it does not mean that when the work itself is being created, there are measures that we have to keep in mind, for example. But I think it has also pushed us to think in terms of what it is that we want to say.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the logistics that have really changed, because they are obviously forcing us to do things in a practical manner in a different way. But I think it is making us think about what do we want to say when we are actually making that contact with our audience. And going from the obvious of how is this whole global situation making us feel and think, I think it has really stripped things down to a very raw place that maybe in recent years we had started losing a little bit.
That's what
and
I was
think
going to say. In
it's
fact,
very
I think
healthy.
Probably it challenged also artists to kind of to venture into also subjects which weren't really being tackled, because recently, and I think again historically it was always the case that when you're going through a relatively good time, you are more focused maybe on the entertainment side of things, so this probably provoked something else also artistically.
For sure, because I think, the more time is going to pass. Now, obviously, we already have more tools now than we did last March and April in terms of how can we reach an audience. But I think, though, especially the first few months when we had the very bare basics to work with, I think that liberated a lot of of creatives, because suddenly, you know, you had very little to say a lot with. So you had to really put your focus on what it is that you really wanted to say and how you wanted to say it. And I find that to be exciting. I mean, I write predominantly, and that was something that I felt took me somewhere completely different. I had to change completely the way I think about how I want to tell a story. And it affected us on all levels, because it affected us logistically, and it also affected us, for example, because it's something I'm also involved in terms of mentoring those who are still in their training.
Exactly.
Because once again, the skills that we had been working on suddenly could not be used. We had to discover a completely different set of skills, which suddenly became very, very important.
Yeah. And I wanted actually to explore this a little further with you both, because you both teach the arts, like different, obviously, forms of art, but you both teach, and you both had to experience this new online teaching. So how was it?
Yes, exactly. Well, as Simone was saying, I mean, we were pushed to go into online mode in March. From a department point of view, I mean, where I lecture, we were already thinking of using blended modes for lecturing and learning, but obviously we didn't have the time to adapt to the situation. I think on the whole, students have actually risen to the occasion. We had, for example, in my department, we had the degree show in last May, and students actually changed from a physical work to an online work between March and May. And it was havoc in the first week, but then things settled down, and then they rose to the occasion and really did a great job out of it. I think what's happening now between March, May, and now has made us realize that unless we do integrate the digital platform within the process and not the product, then we're going to face problems. People have started to realize, and students have more than that, have started to realize that as a practice, they need to integrate some form of technology in order to make their work more effective, or make their work experienced in the way that they originally intended. We cannot just ignore technology now. We need to make it work for us in any which way it works, basically. You know?
Yeah. And I would just like to make a small bracket here. I'm really curious to know what you think in terms of the terminology side of things. So Simone was saying, we had a little bit of difficulty at first in terms of we didn't really know what to call our work. All of a sudden, is it theater? Is it not? So
well,
what do you
I
say
still
about
don't
that?
in a sense, no one knows, and this is the beauty of it, because I think when we pigeonhole things, we have a mindset that can't escape the pigeonhole itself. I think being in an in-between space, and the digital, that's the beauty of the digital, gives you opportunities, and that's what we try to actually push our students to do all the time, to be in this in-between space and look at all the opportunities rather than being on one side and this is the way I'm going to do things. So terminology is part of this whole process.
Okay.
Terminology actually grows with the maturity of the practice.
If it grows.
If it grows. If it doesn't, it's fine. As long as we're open to actually using what it's kind of a DJ kind of culture. We're appropriating things that fit into our practice, be they digital, be they electronic, be they tangible,
I personally think that there are two important concepts to keep in mind here. The first one is that the speed of how things happened, that was the extraordinary situation, because change is infinite. I mean, it's always happening. I mean, if you look at all the possible disciplines that we could bring up amongst us and other practitioners, there's never been a point where things stood still. That's kind of the whole point of art. But because things literally happened overnight, I think at the beginning, part of part of the urgency to define things was probably stemming from fear. Because suddenly our, our vocabulary to define things was not valid anymore, because it was there, but we couldn't put it into practice. So I think it was a very human way to react to it at the very beginning, because people wanted to have at least a little bit of certainty in all of the uncertainty.
And we were probably grieving a
And
loss
it was
here.
exactly,
It was-
yes,
it was
exactly,
grief.
exactly. But I think now, and one of the things I kept saying at the beginning, and I still say now, is that as with everything, change takes time. And this is where I really agree with Vince, that the key word for me here is the process. Everything needs its due time, and we shouldn't rush to define what things are. First of all, because we are still in a pandemic. So at the moment, our hands are tied in a way that once the pandemic is over, things will change again. But that doesn't mean that what we're doing now, I think we need to start moving away now from looking at what the experience has been so far as, exclusively tied to a global event, and start looking at how, listen, once this global event is going to settle down, what can be retained and maybe what not as well. But I find that sometimes we tend to rush a little bit too much to define things, to put our minds at ease. But that is what the process is about. And we can't expect to have it figured out in such a short time, because we feel like this has been going on for 10 years, but it hasn't. It hasn't even been 10 months.
It does feel like
it does feel like it. But I think that is process is always important, and perhaps we had been thinking a little bit too much about the end result, and I think that was very telling about us creatives.
Absolutely. I was reading an article the other day which actually said that this is actually a rehearsal for when we actually start facing global warming issues. And this is very interesting, because people are all the time talking about when we're back to normal, But I think if we are clever enough, we should actually appropriate or keep some things which we have actually learned from this situation and make it work better.
Take this as an opportunity rather than
Yeah.
So I would like to now invite Mario Maempa, who is the director at the Foundation for Cultural Policy Research, for your feedback about what is being said by our panel members. I know that you are currently working you are editor for the Journal of Cultural Management and Cultural Policy for one particular issue, which is going to focus on digital arts and culture. So I'm curious to see what you think about what's being said right now, and also what's the feel from the input which you received for this particular issue of the journal. Mario? Mario, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Greetings from Helsinki. I think it's much more darker here.
It is probably. We can't hear you. Did we lost the?
Yes,
did we lose
I
the connection?
can hear.
Okay. Sorry, we can't hear you very well. So just do another attempt.
Shall I make some more voices?
Okay, it's fine. We can see you
okay
now. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
I put some more voice. So greetings from Helsinki, and thank you for inviting me. I'm just was reading about the Malta profile you sent to the compendium website. I happen to be also chair of or president of the compendium of cultural policies and trends, and we have been this year published kind of profiles or news from different countries, also from Malta. Was it Neville? You wrote this sector. It's thank you for that. But what I heard is the more or less similar discussion we have had here in Finland, and I think over everywhere in Europe, where this compendium pandemic just attacked, and the most severe things happened to the creative sector and artists and festival and event management and all those which totally blocked everything what has happened and what was planned. And of course, first that time for creative things, for time for artistic things, for more intellectual things was very welcomed. But the economic situation for everyone it's difficult. I suppose also for you. But the digital technology, I think my background is I'm an old nerd from the beginning of 80s, and I see that the digital technology first of all as a tool, not the content. I think it's a kind of a way to express, new way to express, and the narrative pattern in art is the same, but this digital tool changes the dramaturgy. Of course, this is kind of a quite straightforward to thinking it, but I was thinking when in the beginning of this pandemic there was a kind of a buzzword of a digital leap or something, that people just started to use these tools that already existed, and people just started to be I think very, very creative in using these. For example, this video online network, digital as network and communication tools. This has helped us a lot, and it's made our life more normal during this pandemic and isolation. But I see it all as a tool that we already had before this pandemic. What has raised my interest, and since you mentioned this journal, I'm a guest editor for this one piece, and it's about digital technology, and also there is some notions that we have to think about this so-called digital leap. But what has raised my interest recently is the kind of a post-digital thinking. That if we think what is digital, then we have to also define what is not digital, and actually it's very, very difficult to find anything which is purely analogical. So where the digital mindset or digital tools are not interfered. Mm-hmm. So and this post-digital thinking, where this natural sciences and technology are seen to work and combine. I can see if we are speaking about the future, so this is something to follow.
Yeah. So, in fact, my next question is related to this. How do you think that this time and what we are doing during these months will actually then impact policy? because it was present, we were discussing it as we were saying before, but now it will probably have a major impact on policy as well. So what's your take on that?
Well, it's a very, very difficult to say, because we are, for example, in my research center, Kupore, we're trying to find out what is right now the kind of best practices that are we have or what we have found during this pandemic, or what has born, and bad practices that will remain, and well, hard to say. I think this this use of digital tools will
Yeah.
be something that we will continue and develop, and we have to learn to use more and develop this time.
Okay.
Isolation. I hope that this doesn't stay. We don't.
Yes, not that. Everything else, but not that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mario. So, Neville, you already said that the Arts Council is looking at a fund, so that means, as we said, that there is a shift in that direction. But again, I'm referring the question I just asked Mario. So, how will this period impact strategy, impact then policy?
Well, I think one thing Mario mentioned that's very interesting is kind of the post-digital. So the kind of eliminating the dichotomy between what is digital and what isn't digital. As in, I think it's something that we're still, perhaps at a local level, struggling to come to terms with, in that we tend to view the digital as something exclusive and the non-digital as something else. I think what we're trying to work towards in our upcoming strategy is to really, as Vince and Simone were saying, make the digital part of the process, part of the practice, part of the ongoing operations of the Arts Council and of the cultural sector and the artistic sector in itself.
But actually, I'd like to challenge that a little bit. Is this for everyone? Because are we being too optimistic about this?
No, I mean, look, when the internet first came about, there was kind of this big promise of, collaboration and of, how it's connecting people and bringing people together and new forms of creation. In many, many, many ways, the internet failed completely in that respect, with a couple of notable exceptions. So I think we do need to really be realistic about how we're going to adapt to the situation, to kind of really integrate this into our work. But I think, again, as Simone was saying, especially, this really is an opportunity where we're faced with a blank slate to a certain extent. So we can kind of shape our strategies and our opportunities in ways that perhaps we didn't really have the opportunity to do over the past years or so. So I think it's really important for us as an Arts Council to take this opportunity. When the pandemic first hit, we saw a lot of public entities, for example, really scrambling to remain relevant in certain ways.
Exactly,
I mean,
that
digging
was the
through their
main-
archives and presenting works that weren't really created for digital
online.
consumption or for
Exactly.
the digital world, and kind of presenting them as, online exhibitions or online performances. But I think this is an opportunity for us to really engage with that and to really think of our practice and our processes in new ways.
Exactly. I think on a strategy level, it's going to be pushing towards that direction, but it's something which was explored already.
Yes, for sure. I mean, in the upcoming strategy, the digital element is kind of ingrained throughout. So I think it's crucial.
But it's certainly this time, obviously.
Of course, it really
affected that. But then on a practice, in terms of practice, like when it comes to the artist and their work, how do you think that is it for everyone? Is it something which needs to be taken up by all art forms?
Well, I think I think it's difficult to say that it's for everyone, as not any art form is for everyone. I mean, I can't be a musician. I'm not, you know what I mean? So I practice my own art form. And in a way, the digital and perhaps the post-digital, which it becomes a more interesting debate later on, because we're within the digital, we talk of realities and augmented realities and virtual realities. But what about mixed realities? The mixed realities that we are actually going through today, whereby the real reality here, the reality of my painting, for example, is also part of the reality of a virtual and an augmented reality. So I think if we try to sectionalize and pigeonhole the digital away from the practice, whatever that practice may be, that is the difficulty that we're facing now, because we haven't really adapted to understanding that the technology itself can be a blessing to some practices, but it can also be just a simple crutch to another.
Yeah.
So it depends on. I really think it depends on the practice itself. Yeah.
I think personally we shouldn't look at it from such a black or white perspective. I think it's more of an experiential. It's more of an experiential thing in the sense that after this, whatever this is over, it's more of what will everyone take with them moving forward into the next phase, whatever that is. Because, for example, let's take theatre as an example. I am sure that the majority of practitioners want to be in a theatre again, want to have people 5 meters away from them and want to hear their reactions and the murmur and the applause. They want to get back to that. I mean, that is irreplaceable, and no screen is ever going to be the same. But I would like to think that having been through this experience, even if you're a person who wants to go back to total straightforward theatre where there's just text, actors, light, sound and audience and that's it. But I think the experience in itself has affected everyone, whether you're going to take technology with you in the space. It's relevant to what extent you're going to take it, but it's going to affect how people are writing, how people are training, how people are imagining concepts in themselves. And in some cases, yes, I'm sure that the presence of technology is going to be far more pronounced than it was before. But I think the experience has also taught us that now, for example, we can be connected with other people who are in completely different continents, and they can experience the entire thing live. And I think from a theatre point of view, for example, technology has shown us in these past few months that if it's going to be part of the theatrical experience, then it needs to be on par with all the other skills that every other creative in the experience is going to show, because we've realized now that you can't have a camera in the corner capturing everything. It's not enough, you know? So that requires people who are artists in their own right, being part of the process and not an addendum at the end of the process where I invite you in the last 3 days to come film it and that's it, you know?
Exactly.
So I think it's the awareness which is most important, and how that is going to affect everyone's practice. It doesn't have to be, let's all be technological with every single possible thing we're going to create after the pandemic is over.
Exactly. And in fact, on that note, I would like to ask Marta Vella, who is the artistic director of Ziguzajk, to give us her feedback about what we just said. Well, Marta actually had to adapt a whole festival to now a different medium, and it was kind of reinvented for this year, or possibly for the years to come as well. So Marta, what's your take, and what are you going to take with you in the after all this ends?
Hi, good morning, first of all, and thank you for the invite. Well, our experience reflects a lot what this morning's discussion has been about. We were also obviously faced with this challenge. Ziguzajk every year happens in November. So when we started working on this year's edition, it was sort of 5 months into our traditional straightforward process when the pandemic hit. We made the executive decision to go digital 100% back in May. And this was actually when things were really looking up. This was when we had 4 active cases in the country. Everyone was looking forward, to summer, to get back to normal. But we stuck to our guns, and this was for a variety of reasons. One, obviously, we were obviously looking at science and looking at the idea of a second wave. The question that we were always asking ourselves was, what model can we have whereby this festival is definitely going to happen? And obviously, with a festival like Ziguzag, you're commissioning artists that have already had a really, really difficult year. So you don't want to be the one who, also cancels this project, also postpones this project. A lot of our audiences are schools. So there was also that challenge with how schools could come and watch the show. And obviously our festival is for children and young people. So for us, even if we had live shows, it goes beyond a decision that an individual makes to get to the theater. And to be honest, when we decided that we were going to go digital back in May, that meant that our plan B became our plan A. And I think that needs to be everyone's sort of way of thinking, because as Vince was saying, we all went digital because we were forced to back in March. So the approach first was very much of a management by crisis approach. But we knew that our festival happens 10 months into this pandemic. So, a little Zoom puppet show or, a little pre-recorded something put together wouldn't cut it. And that's what we did, in fact. So just as Simone was saying, because Simone is one of the artists that we actually worked with, we basically, Ziguzag's core team, also added a mini film crew, so to speak. So we had Semket Kuti as director of photography for all of our shows. We had Ian Psaila, who worked as technical manager. We brought screenwriters and paired them up with artists in other disciplines to, transpose their shows. And actually, just like you mentioned before, Elaine, since we actually started programming this year's Ziguzag in our traditional way, we did actually have, artists who sort of set this one out and said, listen, this is not what I want to do. This is not how I want my project to go. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because what's being asked of artists, I don't think is adapting. I don't think adapting is a fair term. We're not adapting. We are retraining. We are, trying to start something from scratch. And I have utmost respect, for people who have invested decades in training and in their professional career, who want to stick to the medium that they know, because it actually isn't easy. What I will say is that, continuing with Simone's point, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I don't think it's all black and white. Obviously, theater, for example, just like all other art forms, visual art, music, dance, they've survived other pandemics, they've survived wars, arsons, so they will come back with a vengeance. However, once you let go of that resistance and that frustration that obviously this whole thing brought with it, I think we really started questioning accessibility and how there will always be a portion of society that will never be able to make it to a venue for an event. To the theater for a show, to a music venue for a concert, to a gallery for an art exhibition. And what have we been doing for those people? What have we been doing for those audiences? And I actually don't think we have been doing enough. So moving forward, for us at least, I think Zigozaic 2021 will actually be a hybrid because whilst nothing can replace the buzz, being in a theater, the applause, the sense of community, watching something live happening right there, moment to moment, that you can never recreate, nothing will ever replace that magic. But we can't ever forget those people those audiences who won't be able to make it to a theater. And I do think that working online has really facilitated, as frustrating as it can be, technical glitches and kids running around and washing machine going in the background. But I do think that it has facilitated lives for some people and some audiences. And I think that there's something very important to keep in mind, even when we go back to normal.
Exactly. Definitely, Marta, thanks. Thank you for that. And in fact, accessibility is also another point which is important to discuss here. Obviously, we talk about technology being accessible. It might not be accessible to certain people in certain areas or backgrounds, whatever, but it certainly is a key to, as you said, Simone, it could also bring your work, take your work to other countries without actually traveling. It's easier almost, but it could also be a matter of not being that accessible for some. So what are your feelings about this, your thoughts?
Well, from an accessibility point of view, I mean, the internet in itself, the biggest advantage of the internet is connectivity, right? So accessibility and connectivity are two sort of ends of the same argument. No, we do still have a language problem, in the sense that people, a certain category of the population cannot access technology for any reason. I mean, either because they don't know how to use technology, or because they don't have access to this technology. The good thing about what is happening now is that technology is perhaps becoming more affordable in order to access art, whatever, exhibitions online, theater online. It's becoming more affordable because, computers are more accessible. They're becoming part of a household, part of our daily lives, big time. So the accessibility there is being helped, and I think the pandemic will actually help even more, because we start to realize that unless we are literate in using technology and we have access to that technology, then we're stranded. We're really stranded. We're really stranded more than when we were logged into our homes, you see, because if you're logged into your home, in your home, and you don't have access to technology, then that is really, the end of the world for many people. And I really do feel that access is becoming less of an issue, to be honest. And that I think is a really good thing,
In terms of practice, is this accessibility maybe going to compromise the quality of what is being proposed? You mentioned before the example of photography, right? So everyone all of a sudden became a photographer because it was handy, we could do it, and everyone can do it with their own mobile phones. But is there an issue of quality there?
There always will be an issue of quality, but the issue of quality is always very relevant. And the technology itself. I mean, there's a lot of video art around. There's a lot of good video art around, and there's a lot of bad video art around. And this is like in anything else. I mean, yes, the more accessible it is, the easier it is for everyone to work with the technology. But then the market itself actually dictates, what's good and what's bad. So I don't feel that there's a problem there.
I would go a step further, because I think that because I agree a lot with what Vince is saying, because technology is becoming more accessible, but with it being more accessible, that means that the variety of choice is wider. So the artist now has an even tougher job to get people to commit to, creating some kind of communication with your work. And I think that, I think we're already there, but I think the concept of marketing a piece of work is going to become an artistic endeavor in itself, because you have to be very creative in terms of how you're going to attract a person to commit, how you stand out, and it's not just standing out, but to make a commitment. I mean, from a theatre point of view, for example, work is becoming increasingly short. I remember 20 years ago, you could watch a 3-4 hour play without no problems. Nowadays, nobody's going to sit through that in a theatre, let alone if you're at home with all those distractions and you can stop and go and eat and come back, you know. So I think that is something that is very interesting, because I think that already the way we're trying to interact with the audience to make them come to us is very creative in itself. And I think that is very important, and something that it's the online world that has really pushed it, because it's very reachable. I would also, I think a big challenge is going to be how not to end up becoming islands, though, because I think most art forms thrive on the concept of a communal experience, and I think the online world is not very good with that. It's very distracting, it's very fast, and most of the time you're consuming it on your own. So perhaps, I don't know, to watch or partake in an artistic experience does not have to be at home only. I mean, once it's going to be safe to be back outside together, maybe that could be another option, that we can see it together in public places.
And on that note, in fact, I'd like to ask Stephanie Bonnici from ARC Research and Consultancy to share with us what's happened in one particular project which happened earlier on during the very beginning of the pandemic. ARC did a research about this particular project, and I'd like to know exactly what happened, what are the recommendations also which come out of that research. Steph.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to the Arts Council. Yes, so I mean, first of all, thank you. It was a really interesting discussion. I think over the past 7 months, I've had around maybe 6 to 8 discussions around this topic, and every time it's been really interesting to see how the conversation has progressed, how we're looking at it. We started off as seeing digital as a, short-term, panic crisis solution. And suddenly we're talking about, okay, there is a benefit to this. I'm incorporating hybrid next year. I'm looking at different ways of working. I'm seeing this as a new opportunity. And I think that is kind of the angle we took back in March as ARC. As you mentioned, we were witnessing an online performance, a Zoom performance being created, and we kind of wanted to, maybe we preempted a bit that there are going to be questions around, how do we even go around producing an online performance? First of all, that could mean a lot of things. So there was obviously the question of terminology, whether that means, that you have an audience that is online and the performer that is online. At the time, the performance we were looking at, our case study, was actually being produced online, and everyone was in their separate household. So all the team members were separate, no one was meeting, and this performance was created completely online. So that was one scenario. But then obviously, as we started delving into the topic, we kind of understood, you have various different formats that can constitute an online performance, if you want to call it that. And we just kind of started looking a bit into the details of how you would go about presenting an online performance. So if we're talking about technical production, there are potentially going to be considerable shifts in budgets. Whereas, what you would usually, let's say, spend on hospitality is now being spent on certain investments in technology, shifts in the people you have on board, the team members. So bringing technical experts on board is a must. So like Marta was mentioning earlier, having someone who's looking at things from that perspective as well, whereas before, you wouldn't have had certain team members. Which obviously creates opportunities in itself. So the fact that there is an element of collaboration, the fact that, artists are getting in touch with individuals who potentially would not have been part of the creation process before. There is a nice element of opportunity there. In terms of our research projects, the aim, however, was to actually produce content that can support practitioners who are delving into this realm of online performance in this case. So we have created a short documentary where we actually went through the process of this Zoom performance, which we had studied, which was the one I mentioned back in May. And from that we then developed an online toolkit. So this toolkit includes information about technical production, production management. So, things like having clear channels of communication, not underestimating things like contracts, because obviously, although, the context has changed in terms of the platform, obviously it hasn't changed in terms of engagements, in terms of this being actually something that requires effort, time, and commitment. Things like marketing and communication, what you were just mentioning just a few minutes ago, the importance of really knowing the audience, knowing where the audience is now also means, potentially which device they're using to access the work and to view online performance, and kind of really working around that as well. Even when you're choosing a platform, thinking about the kind of features it has, whether those fit, the aims and the objectives of what you want to say and what you want to present, and creating an honest conversation around that, So the idea of bringing in an audience on board onto this experiment is in itself exciting because it's something new. I mean, we experienced that when we saw the Zoom performance in May. It was something no one knew what to expect. It didn't necessarily mean that everyone was happy, but it did offer something and a platform for discussion as well of what kind of work we want to be creating, what kind of work we want to be watching, and what are the limits and maybe not the limits, but actually the opportunities that exist there. And even in terms, of financial sustainability, giving value to the work, how you go about charging such work which is created or presented online, which reaches the audience online. We delve into that through our online toolkit, and then we also have created an academic report with the aim of enabling future research. So obviously we understand that this is just the starting point. We're just touching on kind of these different elements of what online performance is. But we do hope that, the conversation, like what is happening today, will take us further, will get us to meet different case studies of online performances which have worked, which haven't, what have we learned, where can this take us, and I think there's really no limit to where this can go, just like with any other form, like you were mentioning.
Thank you. Thanks, Seth. So, as we are saying, there is definitely, and as we discussed, there is definitely an opportunity. There is definitely the need to invest time, but also to invest ourselves and money in this whole rethinking process. So, as Neville said, like even funds now are going to be looking at other possibilities, at other ways of investing in the arts. So it looks like not such a dull, future, but it looks like it's going to be an interesting ride from now on. Any final comments from your end?
Just one thing to link to what Stephanie was saying. One of the challenges we had as an Arts Council when developing our strategy was that we didn't really have much data related to how audiences were actually engaging with the arts through digital technology. So we had a little bit of data from the cultural participation survey, but that's a survey that was 4 or 5 years old now. And in that time, a lot has changed, not least what Vince was saying in terms of access.
Yes.
And we're actually, at the moment, carrying out a research study specifically looking into how audiences are engaging with digital art and with digital technology, but also looking into their willingness to, for example, pay for certain platforms, look into new forms of funding for public entities, but also for independent artists through subscription models, for example. So I think it's really important for us to start developing a body of data, like Steph was saying, that can really look into these things.
Exactly.
I would like the creative community to take this experience as an opportunity to go back to the roots of what makes creatives, and and have the courage to experiment and make mistakes. Because and I like the fact that most of the research programs that have been conducted in the past couple of months have also looked at what did not work, which I think is very important, and I think is very pivotal to any artistic process. And I find that perhaps sometimes we are a little bit too preoccupied with the final gloss of how things are, and the online world is very, very, very is very dangerous for that as well, because everything is fast and everything is shiny and everything is perfect, but that is not what the artistic process is about, and that's how it should stay even with this shift. And I think it would be extremely interesting and also important.
Thank you, Simone. Vince?
Well, actually, to add on to what Simone is saying, I think this experience has taught us a lot in the fact that we need to rethink our process every other year, I would say. No, I mean, never mind the pandemic itself, but rethink our process in line with what is happening out there, with what is happening in the way that we are disseminating our work, because the biggest problem and the biggest sort of challenge that we have is, okay, how do we disseminate our work, a work which is not totally digital in nature, you see. So, but the artwork, for example, has really adapted quite quickly to that. I mean, biennials have their own platform now, so people don't have to jet to Rio de Janeiro to watch an exhibition. So in a way, we're losing on that kind of personal element, but we're gaining numbers, and I think this is a reality which we have to take account of.
Excellent, thank you. I would like to thank you all for being here, and also our Zoom guests for being with us today. I would like to thank Arts Council Malta for hosting the ACM Hangouts. Feel free to leave us a message on our Facebook page if you have any comments, any remarks, anything you would like to discuss further. So see you next month for another session of the ACM Hangouts. Take care.